We're breaking into our scheduled programming to take you to Beirut, where the Hamas spokesman Osama Hamdan is speaking on the ceasefire deal or not. Let's listen into what he has to say.
Who are deceived of the peace and those who are deceived of the U.S. role as a mediator to achieve peace in the Middle East, you need to reconsider all of this. And Ramadan must be a holy month to support the Gazans, to support the resistance. The resistance is still the option of the Palestinian people and of the nation. Finally, I ask Allah Almighty to help this union and to help this conference and to unify the imams of our nation to achieve the reconnaissance of our nation. Our nation must be together, working together, as they are asked by Allah Almighty. A big salute to the great people of Gaza, and may Allah Almighty reward the people of Gaza forgiveness and mercy. And those resistance people, the lions on the ground, they have done a lot of things, and they have proved how strong and resilient they are to the powers, to the Palestinian powers and faction. Let's say Ramadan is the month of jihad, and we can continue this in Ramadan, and we will follow the steps of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, and we will do our best. We will take a lot of principles from the month of Ramadan on how to support the right and to how to seek justice. And Allah Almighty is great, and most of the people don't know that. It is jihad, victory among them, and peace be upon you all.
Osama Hamdan there, the spokesperson for Hamas, speaking in Beirut. We have been hearing and seeing periodic statements from Hamas in the lead-up to any potential ceasefire, which is under negotiation after a Paris meeting, nearly 10 days ago, a shuttle diplomacy across the Middle East with the mediators and certainly a delegation of Hamas in Cairo right now. What we do understand is that the Israelis have not sent a delegation to Cairo. They are unhappy with certain elements of the agreement, which is about the way the hostages will be released and the number of Palestinian prisoners that Israel detains that are actually incarcerated in Israeli jails. Now, Hamas is not happy with that side of said agreement. The exact minutiae of the details are still under wraps. But also, adding to all of this, we have a scenario where the US is hosting Benny Gantz. And Benny Gantz is himself a part of the war cabinet and a former prime minister. He's in the US to talk to the US vice president and various officials in the US. Now, the US vice president has called for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza, using some of the strongest language from Washington since the start of Israel's war on the Strip. Now, Kamala Harris says that Palestinians in Gaza are suffering a humanitarian catastrophe. She says that a ceasefire is essential to secure the flow of much-needed aid and the release of the captives.
And given the immense scale of suffering in Gaza, there must be an immediate ceasefire. For at least the next 6 weeks, which is what is currently on the table. This will get the hostages out and get a significant amount of aid in. This would allow us to build something more enduring.
Now, Rosalind, Jordan has more from Washington, D.C.
Essentially, the Vice President Kamala Harris is responding to domestic political criticism and grassroots criticism in this country that the Biden administration is on the wrong side of history in the war on Gaza, that it has been giving Israel too much cover as it carries out its war against Hamas and other groups inside Gaza, while not doing enough to actually protect Palestinians who live in Gaza. The vice president, using the word ceasefire repeatedly during her remarks at a Bloody Sunday commemoration in Selma, Alabama, underscored the need to try to get this temporary 6-week-long ceasefire into effect as quickly as possible. She also had tough language for the Israeli government of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, saying that much more needs to be done to get humanitarian aid in. She called on the Israeli government to try to help restore basic services inside Gaza, notably because so many buildings and communities have been destroyed in Israeli airstrikes.
Well, we're joined now by Hassan Barari. He's a political analyst and an officer of international relations at Qatar University. A very brief statement from Osama Hamdan, the Hamas spokesman in Beirut, talking really in general terms about a ceasefire for Ramadan, what imams, the priests and clerics should be thinking and saying in terms of Gaza, but very little really on any talk about a ceasefire, any talk about the negotiations that are ongoing at the moment in Cairo. There's very little we can read into this for the moment because negotiations are so delicate.
Well, I agree with all of the conditions, and now they're waiting for the Israelis to respond. And a compromise should be reached somewhere. I don't know where and when, but it's going to be in Cairo. If a deal is going to come out, it's going to be in Cairo. So Osama Hamdan is maybe telling his audience about what is expected, but not going into details, because I think he's unaware of the details, given the fact that negotiations is still not taking place.
Indeed, one of the moving parts in this is the fact that the Israelis haven't sent a delegation to Cairo. They're not happy with parts of the said agreement, and we don't really know the fine print of that agreement, but we do know it's all to do with how the captives are, where they are, and how they'll be released, and how they will be equated to Palestinian prisoners that are also incarcerated in Israeli jails.
Well, there's a sense that the Israelis are looking for intelligence, you know. They want to know the names and the whereabouts, and this is something probably suspicious, you know, and that's why Hamas is unwilling to offer the Israelis this at this time. Probably they will provide the information later on if there is a deal in looming. But until at this point, I think it is difficult for Hamas to give them the details, because they interpret this as providing them with the intelligence necessary for the Israelis in days to come if a deal is not reached. So we have to wait and think. Israel is unwilling to send the delegation now, but this is not a final say. They will probably send it later on, because the Americans would step in and they would put a lot of pressure on the Israelis, and the Israelis would go. At the end of the day, they will go and negotiate. Now, whether they're going to reach a deal before Ramadan or after that or during Ramadan, you know, this remains to be seen.
Nobody has an exact answer to this, and it's interesting. We've asked lots of analysts how you assess this. Hamas are talking, the leadership of Hamas are in the negotiations. They're outside of Gaza. There is a Hamas within Gaza. There are sporadic and broken lines of communication. It takes time to get messages to and from, if that is at all possible, for certainly Hamas's side. One wonders whether those communication links are clear or are broken, or how they're actually getting those messages to each other. We don't know the logistics, but I just wanted to talk to you about the difficulty in getting messages from inside a war zone to outside to the negotiators.
Well, absolutely, you're right. I mean, the communication is almost broken, because everything is censored, and the people, the Hamas leaders inside Gaza, are almost isolated from the world, simply because of the continuous bombardment. But also the political leadership outside Gaza are actually entitled to come up with a deal if the deal meets the demands of the people inside. And we know the broad line, the broad baseline of the agreement from Hamas perspective is a ceasefire. Now, whether permanent or not, you know, I think this is not a final say. There will be exchange of prisoners, but also the humanitarian aid to reach people, especially in the northern part of Gaza. So if the leadership in Qatar and now in Egypt can reach a deal with the Israelis on these issues, I think the ones inside Gaza will be probably happy for this, simply because they cannot take part in these negotiations. They have to rely on the external leadership.
And while those negotiations carry on, there is pressure from all sides to try and find a solution to this. Can we just talk about sort of the pressure that's on the US Democratic Party right now, especially the president and now the vice president, who has remained pretty quiet, really, but now is very vocal. Why is Kamala Harris pushing this forward? Why is her voice being heard so very vocally right now over the weekend?
Well, there are a couple of points in this. And the first one is they're embarrassed simply because they said Monday would be the day for a deal. And secondly, there's the internal critiques within the United States against the leadership. And many analysts and many also grassroots of the Democratic Party think that Biden is not taking the right course and he's maybe on the wrong side of history. And simply because the Americans are providing the Israelis with everything they need and everything they want, actually, they should have a say. So Biden, through Kamala Harris, is trying to send the message to the Israelis that probably they're growing impatient with Netanyahu, and also there's a limit of what they can do. But more importantly, they're receiving Benny Gantz, which is the competitor of Netanyahu. And this is a clear message that the Americans are really trying to find a replacement for Netanyahu. And this probably will change the priorities of Netanyahu, because Netanyahu is afraid of internal sin. Now, if the United States stepped in to change him, I think he would be in trouble.
Hassan Barari, thanks so much for your analysis.
Sure.